As coronavirus death totals increase and states, counties, and cities continue extending their stay-at-home orders, funeral homes have found themselves in a tough spot trying to help people say goodbye to loved ones. Mitch Legan reports on how funeral homes are handling this unprecedented situation.
Todd Walton has been working in the funeral business for nearly his entire life.
I actually started in the funeral business when I was 16 as a part-time job, so this is my 30th year.
Now the director of funeral homes in Spencer, Linton, and Worthington, Walton has spent the last 30 years in funeral service, and he's never seen anything like this before.
The pig flu, I remember when that first arose and people had passed from it too. And that was the biggest scare I think we had as far as any kind of a disease compared to this today, but nothing compares to this.
Last week, Governor Holcomb extended his order for all Hoosiers to stay in their homes except for essential business until the end of April. Part of that order limits gatherings in the state to 10 people or fewer, which means Weston Parish and Pedigo Funeral Home in Spencer has been quieter than usual recently. In fact, a pair of funerals in Albany, Georgia a few weeks back has turned that city into one of the U.S.'s coronavirus hotspots. All this led one of our viewers to ask, what happens with funerals now?
We're able to hold services, as I mentioned, with 10 people or fewer. So it is a gathering. We can have a service and honor a life, but it just looks different than it did 3 months ago.
That means people like Steve Wolfgang, who recently lost his mother Jean, will have funerals with just a couple of close family members present.
When my dad died, they were known as a couple. You saw them together. They were married 68 years. We filled, for his memorial service, the largest room that Flannery Buchanan had was filled. They had to set out more chairs. I would guess in excess of 100 people. So for Mom, we're down to 10 people.
Wolfgang says normally the 10-person cap would create difficulty deciding who could go. But restrictions on travel across the country almost made the decision easy.
My brother lives in Portland, Oregon, and they are not going to be able to travel. My sister lives in Louisville, but even though that's 100 miles away, the governor of the Commonwealth has said if you leave the state, you're going to be put in quarantine when you return.
And if losing a loved one during the coronavirus pandemic isn't enough, that 10-person limit includes funeral staff. Wolfgang says counting himself, there were just a handful of people at his mother's funeral in Indy last week.
We had a service in our Linton Funeral Home, and we had to make sure that only 10 people were in the building. I actually, one of my funeral directors was running that service, so I stepped out during the funeral so one more person could come in, and I stayed outside.
With all these constraints, funeral directors and attendees are coming up with ways to share the experience with more people.
They might be off in a distance at a cemetery, I guess, if they show up, but we're doing everything we can to keep under those guidelines to protect the public health and try to take good care of people. And one of the nice things we do, and I thank God that we did this last year, we put in the capability to webcast.
That's what the Wolfgangs did.
There will be a time, I hope after all of these restrictions are lifted, we can come together for a memorial service and share our memories. But right now we're focused on the promise of eternal life as John describes it in 1 John chapter 2.
Funeral directors like Walton and Smith say they understand no text message or live stream can take the place of being there in person.
So we just keep looking for creative solutions such as live streaming. We have a program that we just started here at our funeral home called Hugs from Home, where people can get online and leave a note to the family that we will print and put out for them at the funeral service to make them feel like those people are there with them as well.
Many families, including the Wolfgangs, are choosing to have smaller, more intimate gatherings now and opting for a memorial service or celebration of life down the road.
It's just not the same, no question.
Both Walton and Smith agree that the situation is less than ideal, but 10-person funerals will be the norm for the foreseeable future. And unfortunately, odds are there will be more of them in the coming weeks. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
Officials say it's unlikely COVID-19 will be passed from the deceased to the living. Funeral directors like Walton and Smith say preparing bodies now isn't much different because they always treat somebody like they have something. As